If you're looking for a masterclass in how to not waste a single line of dialogue, you found it in Rian Johnson's 2019 unexpected whodunit, Knives Out. Every sentence and image is packed with meaning, and I could have made this an hour-long video just talking about clever foreshadowing and masterful payoffs. Who knows, that could be a future project. But for now, this movie was an absolute delight to break down, and one of the easiest watches I've had on this channel so far. The timestamps for each sequence can be found in the comment section for your viewing pleasure. Now, let's begin. We start, as always, with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. The death of Harlan Thrombey ignites the mystery. Then we meet Marta Cabrera, tense with grief and also guilt, who stands as Harlan's displaced and unemployed nurse. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonist exists in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Detective Elliot conducts follow-up interviews with the family, noticeably without the presence of Marta, as we get a peek into their internal discourse, with certain versions already conflicting with each other. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. Benoit Blanc is finally acknowledged and introduced, which leads us to examine the effect of that something new to the status quo. Specifically, what's different now, and also what remains the same. Blanc takes over questioning, less ornamental than he suggested, then prods the family as they devolve into shit-talking and roots out some early inconsistencies. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Richard's affair is exposed, presenting another motive previously unknown, and versions of the story begin to deviate from reality. Next, our characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, and this is always narrower in scope than what the third act will demand. Richard scrambles to cover his extramarital tracks, while Blanc finally gives Elliot the reason he's there. Then Marta is used as a barometer for Blanc's best guesses. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. Marta's physical revulsion to dishonesty, Blanc's gentlemanly deductions, the family's inconsistent versions, and the mystery at hand. Which brings us to the brief events that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. Blanc reveals that his client is a faceless wad of cash, and an even greater mystery than the apparent suicide. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they discover the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Elliot provides the timeline of the night in question, finally orienting us around Harlan's death, and giving us the boundaries within which the mystery takes place. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat, rather than internal or emotional. We witness Marta's unfiltered version, the absolute truth from her perspective. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Marta realizes that she mixed up the medication by accident, yet Harlan scrambles to clear her of any suspicion, or else his inheritance change-up will be nullified by the Slayer rule. We endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Marta navigates the hastily constructed alibi and struggles to remember small details in the moment, lands in front of an eyewitness, then deceives Blanc by omission. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story, which they've learned and gathered so far. Marta's POV fills in some missing moments of the family's dubious character, and new devices of the mystery are introduced for future use. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles. Moments and elements of the first act are used to gauge their progress. Walt offers Marta some help from the Act 1 inheritance. Blanc expands upon his Act 1 reputation, though with an increasing air of mystery, and resumes his Act 1 interviewing to pry ever deeper. We're shown the absolute truth of Harlan's Act 1 death. Then we check in on Marta's Act 1 family, blissfully unaware, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. It's revealed to us that a drop of blood places Marta in the room, framing her for the wrong mode of death, and there's no turning back from here. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. Marta destroys evidence to keep Harlan's plan alive, while Blanc sniffs around her exact route and exits. Next, our characters complete their narrow scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow or altogether meaningless without completing a wider scope objective. Ransom finally arrives for the will reading, but he's chaos to Blanc's case. The family teases out one part of the mystery, but it splinters them even worse. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self, their worldly identity, or their physical journey. Blanc stumbles onto the secret entry back into the house. Harlan bequeaths his entire estate to Marta, uniting the family with fury. Then Ransom provides her getaway. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. Ransom finally gives us his missing version, while the family grapples to find options to fight Harlan's will. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss. This is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Ransom reveals the blackmail arrangement for his share of the inheritance. Then Meg turns on Marta for the family, and everyone knows that she won't surrender the fortune. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. The inheritance grabs the attention of lawyers and the press, while Blanc tends to the mostly ignored Nana. Then Walt delivers a not-so-subtle threat on behalf of the family, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. An anonymous delivery reveals to Marta that a paper trail exists. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the wider scope objective. Someone is covering Marta's tracks. The anonymous person requests a meetup. Then Marta puts herself in Blanc's crosshairs, and she and Ransom are apprehended. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. The missing medical bag resurfaces. Chekhov's morphine overdose finally pays off, and Blanc is told a version of the actual truth. Then Marta faces the family, prepared to confess to her accident. But of course, Benoit Blanc is on the case. Then the final confrontation plays out between our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force. The case unravels with Blanc's dizzying deductions. Ransom is identified as the mysterious client. Marta is cleared of wrongdoing by the toxicology report, and she helps fill in the missing pieces of the puzzle, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Marta holds her lie and her puke to trick Ransom into confessing his guilt. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Ransom tries to kill Marta anyway, but the aforementioned prop knife seals his fate. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. The family turns their back on Ransom, more than ever before, I suppose. and Harlan's hidden message divulges Richard's infidelity. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Blanc confesses that he knew of Marta's guilt by an early clue, and she stands with her inheritance, the family at her whim. And there you have it. Rian Johnson's 2019 whodunit Knives Out adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way. It demonstrates that even a clever whodunit follows the Hollywood standard format. Now, let's move on from normal everyday daddy issues to mythological supernatural daddy issues with our fourth dive into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Join me next time for Kenneth Branagh's 2011 superhero blockbuster, Thor. As always, thank you so much for your time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk at you next time.